whenever you have highly oligopolized or monopolized markets, there is an economic theory that says the way you can disrupt these markets is by being a maverick.
Welcome to The Regeneration Will Be Funded. This is a show about regenerative finance. We are exploring pathways to a life-affirming economy. I'm your host, Matthew Monahan. Today's guest is Camila Rioja. She is the president of Plexos Institute. Camila, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much for this amazing invitation to join.
And we're here at DevCon in Bangkok. How's your conference gone so far?
So far, so good. Actually, so far, amazing. It's my first time in Asia, and I couldn't have asked for nothing else because at Chiang Mai, we had this first, experience where things were super chill, and we had the opportunity to connect with other participants. And here now, well, it's Bangkok, right?
Yes, indeed. And I can't say as I'm super familiar with your work, but our mutual friend, Tony Lai, said you were working on community currencies in Brazil and that we should absolutely talk. So maybe starting from there, like what are you working on, and take us through a bit of the journey?
Since you mentioned Tony, I think it's an important part of this conversation to say, how did I end up here, right? Or to saying what we currently work with.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a lawyer by trade. I've done this for 10 years. And within my experiments, and my specialty at the time was law and economics, I was just trying to find ways to hack the law. And the reason for that comes from an economic concept that's called a maverick player. So whenever you have highly oligopolized or monopolized markets, there is an economic theory that says the way you can disrupt these markets is by being a maverick. But who or what is a maverick? It's a player that is innovative, fast, lean, intensive in technology, and therefore can provide other solutions. And in my explorations within that context, I got in touch with legal hacking, and computational law. That's where my path and Tony is crossed. So my approach to the technology, it's like, okay, does this have, and my personal passion, a real world use case? Does it involve how we connect with each other, how we make our rules of engagement, how we assess the effects of those rules of engagement? So this is a bit of what nourished my path, towards from a lawyer, right? Reading, writing, teaching, to a builder, what I see myself doing in the space.
And when you say this term computational law, for someone who may not have heard that before, what does that mean?
So imagine that we are considering how the rules of engagement are made and also how they're implemented. So computational law, it's an approach related to computation, but also to rules and how you can establish new systems and the way these things interact.
Gotcha. So that's the backdrop and context. And now you said you're a builder. What are you building?
So I funded Plexos Institute. And the purpose of the institute is to democratize access to the benefits of emerging technologies. We know that there are a lot of use cases to emerging tech. We experiment with these emerging cases. We experiment with the benefits of it. But how do we democratize access to the sad benefits, right? So this is kind of a way to sing together and maybe to weave my different passions into one mission.
Yeah. So presumably that democratization of access so that the economic advantages are accruing to everyone, so that the tools don't just imprint the same cultural patterns of, a small number of elite people that are, designing these systems from very specific geographical areas. And are there other aspects of that democratization that are really important to you?
Yeah, I think one of the important aspects of that democratization, besides all of those you rightfully mentioned, it's how we propose the change and how we operate the change. So who are the stakeholders sitting at the table when we are considering what constitutes like an issue to be addressed? Or what is the interaction of the different stakeholders? And I can give you one example, right? Plexos is active in 3 different fronts. So the first one is education, awareness, and also like liaising with different stakeholders to explain the relevance of different topics, building, which are like different journeys, right? It could be from a top of funnel hackathon to the actual development of a solution to partnerships.
Mm.
And the partnership aspect is super relevant because if we are talking about real world economy, who are the ones saying where the problem is?
Mm.
Maybe it's an association, maybe it's the state,
Mm.
maybe it's the journalists, maybe it's like a minority. But how do you make a room or you put on a table where the different stakeholders that need to be there to address this problem are working in a safe environment
Mm.
and and are understanding each other? Because to solve real world problems, you're going to step in the feet, or you're going to have to deal with the intersection of different externalities. So let's say a community has a very complex issue with fires. So to fight fire in a specific land where you don't have much of the monitoring or the presence of the state, you're going to need like social organization. And you're also going to need funding. You're also going to need maybe a permission from the state to operate something like a fireman department without having the
Mm.
fireman department in there per se.
Mhm.
So this is just one example on how we're going to have to learn how to communicate with each other and also abide by some methodologies in which all of the stakeholders that see things from a very different perspective agree that we are making a progress towards a shared desired goal.
Mm. And so what are some of the approaches that you can
Yeah.
point to create those types of safe environments for that dialogue
Yeah.
to happen and that coordination?
So a very solid use case and proposition, and actually an invitation that I'm going to be doing here relates to a community currency project in Brazil.
Mhm.
So I'll just quickly lay some facts because it's new, right? As I told
Mm.
you in the beginning, it's the first time that I am in Asia. So
Mm.
I am understanding a different culture. I am understanding how to like move from one place to the
Mm.
other.
Including on the back of those motorbikes.
Twice today, as we were talking earlier, because
Uh,
I got lost. So it's on the details, right? So
mm.
Brazil, what is Brazil? Who are we? What are we?
Mm.
Very simply put forward, in terms of like dimensions, we are 205 times the size of Switzerland.
Mm.
Besides that, for the past year, we were chair of the G20. Next year, we're going to be hosts of COP30. Moreover, among so many interesting things, we just launched a stock exchange solely focused on refi solutions, and it has $10 billion
Mm.
committed to three different areas of activities, both from like the local government, but also international government and some private parties. So
Mm.
this is the context, right? Very
Mm.
briefly of Brazil. And what is Recife? So Recife, this is a specific city where we are going to be assessing this opportunity of a community currency,
Mm.
is located in the northeast region of Brazil.
Mm.
Usually, when people think about Brazil, they're going to think about São Paulo.
Mhm.
They're going to think about Rio de Janeiro. They're going to think about Carnaval. What people don't know is that one of the most delicious street party carnivals happens in Recife,
Mm.
which is in the northeast region. When we think about Brazil, maybe we think about the startup or the emerging tech scenery, and we're going to think about São Paulo, which is kind of New York.
Mhm.
Or we're going to want to have fun in our Miami, which is kind of Rio de Janeiro. I'm just making a very like
Mhm.
blunt
Mhm.
and type of like straightforward comparison. But then you have this whole other myriad of like cultures inside Brazil, and Recife is a very interesting uh, point of contact or experimentation for that.
Mm.
Why? First, something kind of the Silicon Valley of Brazil is located in there. What
Mm.
do I mean by that? It's an island
Mm.
where 18,000 workers from 400 different tech companies have been working for the past 20 years in technology only.
Wow.
In contrast to that, this same city, Recife, has the second highest level of inequality in Brazil. So that's an interesting scenario.
Mm.
Something else to be added to this mix, right? Which is carnival, technology, inequality, beautiful place, and amazing beaches to explore, is the fact that community currencies, they are a reality in Brazil.
Mm.
There are over 180 municipal and community banks. And the only state in Brazil that still doesn't have a community currency, a community bank, is the state of Pernambuco. where Recife is located.
Wow.
So this is what we're pushing forward, right?
So maybe how do these community currencies throughout Brazil work for those of us who aren't familiar
Yeah.
with that? And then maybe like, why doesn't Recife have one already?
Okay. So this is super interesting because whenever I'm in a tech conference or a blockchain conference, a crypto conference, people are talking about community currencies from different approaches, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, as if this is a suggestion from the technology to the people.
Hmm.
However, the way that this has evolved in Brazil was in a much more like community driven way.
Mm.
So according to our legislation, you can start a community bank and you can decide the rules on how you like give credit to your neighbors.
Mm.
So basically with $400, and this is a real story from Banco Palmas, which is roughly 2,000 reais, a community is started a bank to give out loans to incentivize the local economy.
Mm.
This has grown to a point where there is a Web2 app in the phone of millions of people across the region, specifically, where credit, the way of like paying for your goods or services, your breakfast in the morning, and also your, I don't know, maybe the medicine that you need, the rice for you to cook your amazing lunch, which by the way in Brazil is rice, beans, and usually a very good meat. You should try whenever you are in there. You can pay this and create this circular economy.
Mm.
So we have these buckets of communities that have been making each other stronger
Mm.
by adhering to local circular practices.
Mm.
And there are different reasons, right? Reasons why Recife doesn't have a community currency just yet. But the scenario in which we are at this point is that Plexos has made a cooperation agreement with the City Hall of Recife,
Mm.
in which they want to collaboratively explore how a community currency could look like through an innovation journey where the technology community, the region community, the refi community are invited
Mm.
to first say or tell the suggestions of the different aspects of a tech stack or governance models that would, constitute a valid or desirable model of a community currency on a Web3, and then to hack this in safety under a regulatory and technological sandbox. So
Mm.
going back to your previous questions, right? It's like how Plexus is acting to create the safe spaces. It's one, finding a real use case
Yep.
within a context that's favorable for the flourishment, right,
Mhm.
of interesting solutions. Then making the partnerships needed and a bit of the methodology, right, on how we can engage
Mm.
to push forward this initiative. And thirdly, by inviting,
Mhm.
because this is what we can do right now. So
Mm.
invite everybody to take part on this journey to hack a real world solution for the city and population of, not for, with the city and population of Recife.
Mm. Are there other communities that you're drawing inspiration from outside of Brazil who have done community currencies on Web3, or where are you drawing lessons from in general?
So we, at this point, as we have been saying here, 180 experiences in Brazil.
Mhm.
What we did at this current stage of the research is to map those initiatives.
Nice.
So this is the very first time here in Bangkok, here at AFCON, that we are starting to make this call out to the international community by
Mm.
presenting Recife, by presenting Brazil and the opportunity and saying, do you want to tell us
Mm.
how this was done? Do you
Mm.
want to show us like the opportunities just so we can learn
Right.
how a Web2 established model of community currencies
Mm.
merge with like a Web3 model could potentially look like in the future?
Nice. Are the community currencies the 180 that you've mapped in Brazil? Yeah, I'd love to learn more about those. Like, do they have interoperability between them?
To a limited extent, and
Mhm.
this is what brings like this aspect of a circular economy. But it's important to say that each of those, they come with like business rules or operating rules determined by two different things. The first one is the state legislation,
Mhm.
what can be done and what cannot be done.
Mhm.
So this is a case by case analysis and scenario in which you look at the situation, right? And you see what's possible to be done
Mm,
or not. That's why you can imagine that the interoperability is limited to an extent.
mm. And then how does it work within the national currency itself and the tradability and the
Yeah,
taxation and so forth?
yeah. So there is the opportunity to cash out
Mm-hmm.
per se from those. But what's been observed is that when the circular economy like component is ignited, this strengthens the local community to a greater level.
Because it's the Brazilian real, right? Yeah,
Yes, the fiat currency of Brazil, it's called Brazilian real.
gotcha. And does profit that accrues within a community currency get taxed the same way? Like, what's the taxation rules
It's going to depend again,
on?
also, and it's not only a tax matter, but it's
Mm,
also like a transaction cost matter,
mm-hmm,
right? There's all that in the system, and
mm-hmm,
here I'm doing like maybe a plug or a connection to
mm,
Web3 because a lot of the economic models
mm-hmm.
they can be revisited, right? So
Right.
the way we are envisaging, and you just opened the door for me to go a little bit to the
Mm,
side of a tangent of your question, but I would take it because
mm,
at the current stage, we are looking at this opportunity through four different lenses. The first one is community aspects.
mm,
The second one is economics. The third one is like law, sandbox, interactions with like central bank or central banks or banks in general. How do
mm.
we, and the Web3 community, and of course the technology and the infrastructure stack.
Got it. Great. So you'd give a talk at Funny in the Commons. You're here in Bangkok, just I guess putting out that invitation, that call for
Yeah,
feedback, input from the international community,
yeah.
trying to kind of, I guess, build bridges between these community currencies that are happening in Brazil that you're drawing inspiration and research from, but then also this new technology tooling and these new communities that are forming around Web3, community currencies. Any key points that I missed there?
No, no, it was perfectly put. And maybe just to add on, like,
Mm,
what is the timeline for this
mm,
invitation and this project that we are
mm-hmm,
conducting, right? And I actually forgot to mention something extremely important that comes handy right now, which
mm,
is the current state of the technology in Recife when it comes to public goods and public services.
mm,
Because there's a hack in there. The
mm,
population of Recife, the city specifically, it's around 1.4 million people. And most of the public services, they're now rendered through a Web2 app
mm,
that's called Conecta Recife or Connect Recife. The city hall has like a forward approach, which is if you're an individual, if you have rights, you shouldn't be asking us. We should be providing you.
mm,
So they're implementing the zero click policy in which you receive to start your rights, for instance, a special parking space when you retire
mm-hmm,
through this app.
mm,
So there is already there a connection in which like a digital government is interacting in a safe way, in a safe space with the individuals. And how did that
mm-hmm,
kickstart this community currency, this community project? There is a V1 called Capiba,
mm,
which is a loyalty program that has already been implemented in this Web2 app
mm.
that is already installed in over 1 million phones.
Wow.
So, how does this work? The City Hall, through a policy done by the Secretariat of Sports under the Secretary Gabriel, they drafted this idea that the community would be healthier if they were to exercise, because sedentarism is the third highest cause of death due
Mm,
to non transmittable diseases. So they said, public goods, what should we do? So they did public gyms
mm,
with personal trainers in which you could schedule an appointment
mm,
and go there to practice. And a way to gamify this and to incentivize, they did a loyalty program in which them, but also the private companies were offering gifts.
mm,
So this was the context through which they invited Plexos Institute to think, and through which we're inviting you
mm.
to think with us. There is an app, Web 2, meaning UX, UI problem solved, and people trusting and using it and knowing how to troubleshoot it. And then one use case that's super established and this invitation for an evolution,
Mm,
right? So we need to think, what does a community currency look like on
mm,
that aspect? And another important point to be added is that the city hall wants to explore with paying social benefits through the community currency. So from the original budget of the public goods, experimenting the payment and the life cycle of this through tokens.
Mm-hmm.
So, what types of models, economic models, going back to your last question, does this allow us? Okay, if fiat money is staying in a community bank, not a traditional bank per se, there are differences on it, but it's also going to accrue interest. Could we potentially, one, pay the benefits, live this fiat money accruing interest, then share the interest accrued in forms of microloans? I'm not inventing this, like Yunus has proved it, right? And maybe what we want to do, it's hack and plug the different solutions on it. Are there other different loyalty programs that we could do to incentivize a healthy, happy, energetic, and participative life of an individual? How do we use this app that is already in there to bring this million of people into the governance of the system? What are the aspects that we want to try and test? So going back to the timeline that I promised I would address, phase one was like, let's analyze this app. Let's understand what the social benefits are, what are the current social benefits that are being paid. What's the size of them? What's the economic impact of this, like accruing interest? How many people are receiving each one of this? What is the demographics that we want to address first? How are we going to measure the impact of this getting into this economy? How do we provide maybe for an API in which through the sandbox, the different startups could provide and test solutions with parts of the demographics? So we did a preliminary like assessment of the situation, completed. Now we're in the phase two, which is to request for feedback. So we have a very simple form. Anybody can go in there and say, hey, when it comes to the ZK, to the tech stack on the privacy, ZK is this. This is what we would suggest. Here's the demo and how we believe this would protect the privacy of the individuals using it. And in the other 4 components as well. And then stage 3 is a pop-up city with a regulatory sandbox attached to it, just so we can like experiment and try in real life next year at Recife City, these initiatives that we are pushing forward.
Well, it's so exciting because, you know, a lot of the infrastructure conversations that happen in the blockchain community, people are feeling like, okay, we've got a lot of the infrastructure ready. Where are the real world use cases, the real world examples, the instantiations of this technology to make a difference in people's lives? And it feels like you're bringing so many themes together in terms of public goods funding, a regulatory sandbox, community currency experiment, hybrid of kind of rethinking currencies, but shaping it with governance. You know, how do we, you know, literally using words like, how do we hack this, you know, together? So I'm excited to see more and more of these proliferate. I think it's an example where blockchains stretches and opens the imagination for places all over the world to, as you said, start to build more circular economies, to build more wealth inside of their local jurisdictions, to re-enliven civic participation at a deeply place-based level. And you're, in my opinion, just like at the forefront of something that's going to continue to be a wave and a movement that happens globally. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to follow the journey. Best of luck. People can go to plexosinstitute.org to give you feedback. Any final messages you want to share, calls to action, or other words in this format?
Let's hack together and think about this as a journey, an experimentation, right? To solve real world problems. We have already some established institutions, groups, community hubs, syndicates that are living these problems on a daily basis. So the final message is for us as a group that wants to see the regeneration take place, to ignite the conversations with pace, calm, and creating a safe space where we can see and help each other in our joint mission of seeing these initiatives flourish into real world solutions to much needed problems.
Camila, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
So as you heard, go to plexosinstitute.org for more information about this great project. For other conversations we've been recording here at DevCon in Bangkok 2024, just go to maearth.com. Thanks for being with us.